So I found another piece of news that is, I think it's concerning. It's not as concerning as the suppression system supposedly not being in the game. It's about periscopes. So Clamachi has said, periscopes maybe. And I think that's pretty worrying because when I played Reforger the last few weeks, the two things I mostly was thinking about most of the time was suppression system and looking forward to the periscopes, especially in BRDM and the BTR. And I was sure they absolutely have to add them because Arma 3 DLC, the tank DLC, had them. And there's no way they would not add it because it just has to be in the game for it to function. And now he says maybe. And he says we're on the stage of researching how it could be achieved in the best way. So first I'd like to demonstrate how it currently functions. So let's say you go into BTR. Let's go into the commander seat. So you got periscopes here, you got periscopes here. And so if you're playing on first-person servers, the only way to look out as a commander right now is to use that here. And you can probably, eventually they're going to make the commander periscope work, because I think it works on the BTR, on the BRDM too. However, those things are necessary to function because the way the vehicle is constructed, you're pretty encased in it, so you have a pretty poor view of your surroundings in the vehicle. That's why these vehicles have all these viewing ports like that. See, it's a pretty prominent thing on BTR. And there's a game that had it, I think, was it even Red Orchestra 1? I think Red Orchestra 2 had it for sure. But you would be inside of a tank, and you would have like a viewing port, you could look up to it. I think it was press right mouse, and then it would let you zoom in and look through it. And I think the developers currently probably have a technical problem, because if you make it a periscope, then obviously what you're seeing out, you're not seeing directly out of the port. You're looking out of the one mirror that. How can I show that now? There's basically you have this one mirror. It reflects up and then it reflects forward, so you're not seeing directly through it. And that probably means they have to do a picture-in-picture thing. If it's within the cockpit view, if you still want to see the cockpit around it, that can cause a performance problem. Because it's like looking through a rifle scope with a picture-in-picture scope, which means the scene has to be rendered 2 times. And if you do it like that, where you can just look around and every mirror is active as you're looking around like that while seeing a normal view, I think that's a performance problem, especially in consoles. And my worry is that right now they don't know how to solve that problem, so they might skip the thing altogether. And I think a backup way to do it would probably, like, let's say you own PC and you have a strong computer, there should be a possibility to have all of them be picture-in-picture scopes if you have a really strong machine with graphics card. And this would be a second option where it's picture-in-picture, so if you look at it, you right-click. Then as you zoom in, basically the screen goes black, fades a bit, gets some blur, and then unblurs as you see through the scope. Then it switches to a picture-in-picture version of it. Then you can look through each report like that. And here's some arguments why the developers should absolutely not drop the ball on that. Because I think that, as I mentioned in the video yesterday, the developers are 90% all the way to making this the perfect infantry combat simulator with some light vehicles around it. For example, I really like how they added getting in and out of hatches. I think there was a lot of animation effort, and I think it's great. However, if they stop now at 90%, and some people make the argument that, I think Clamachi himself said about a suppression system, that mods will take care of it. But here's a problem. I think that was a problem with almost every Arma game at its time, even back in Flashpoint. They do something great, they go 90% all the way, and then you think there's some extra feature that takes some, well, let's say considerable extra amount of effort, but it would make the game perfect for its time. And then you leave that part out, leave it to mods. And then mods immediately fill the gap because the game needed it. And then the next Arma game has that stuff built in. So for example, if you play Arma 3, or Arma 2 even, they had a pretty simple radio system in Arma 2, and I think Arma 3 too. And then there was it the ACA radio? That I only vaguely remember how it worked. And the Task Force radio, where you had like these really cool radios that you could like use the dials on it. And then everybody always played with them. And the developers thought, okay, when they make Reforger, they integrate it into the game. And now you have a radio system. Do I have a radio right now? Where's the radio? that's almost has the same fidelity as Task Force Radio. Now, technically, it has more fidelity because it's an actual 3D model you can turn the knobs on. But I think the developers made some top-level game design decisions where all of that is not actually used, and you just use the radio menu by pressing, is it G or something? Which I think is a bad idea. I think the player should actually pull out the radio to fumble with the frequencies, because it keeps you in the game mode like that. And it wouldn't waste the developer effort they put into dialing all the things like that. So here's my concern. The developers, when it comes to periscopes, they're going to just say, okay, let's just let mods do it. Let's go 90%, let mods do it. And then we have the same problem that 10 and 15 years from now, when Arma 5, not Arma 4 comes out, Arma 5, it will have periscopes and all the features that mods will fill out in Arma 4 and Reforger. So why not do it 100%? So you can have an out-of-the-box, without mods, Reforger and Arma 4 experience where everything works like it should. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't play mods. It's just that there's some features the game base should, the base game should have. And imagine how bad Arma 4 would be if they... Let me explain it this way. Let's say Arma 4, I think the developers hinted that it's going to be a continuation of the Reforger setting. So it's going to be 1989 Cold War. And I think it's a really good idea. So you probably have T-72 tanks, T-80 tanks, Abrams tanks, and all that. Now imagine how bad it would be if they only add half the fidelity, no periscopes. And I even wonder if they're going to add like the difference between automated loading system and a manual loader. Because I really would like to have, I think Abrams have manual loaders for a player to actually have to grab a shell from the rack. And there would be an animation to stuff it into the gun. And imagine if Arma 4 comes out, it has all the vehicles, the track vehicles the players want, but they only get half the fidelity, where the periscopes don't work and a few things are oversimplified. Because I think the argument here is that developers cannot go back on fidelity right now or drop the ball on it. Because the moment they decided to have like this great interior fidelity for BTR vehicles, a periscope was an absolute must to also function in the game. I mean, it's assumed. As I mentioned at the beginning of the video, it's that in the Arma 3 Tanks DLC they had it. And I think some players may say that it's just some type of gimmick on nothing important, but I don't think that's the case. It's basically having a as high fidelity as possible experience with every vehicle they have in the game. Because they do that with the USZ, with the manual gear shifting. And I would say some of the greatest things in Reforger is the fact that you can actually drive with manual stick shift. Because most of the time you spend time driving to combat instead of being in combat.